Hey y'all. Hey, tonight I wanted to share just a parable that I love, and I think every time I read it, I always find deeper meaning in it. Let me adjust this real quick. See if that works. And so I'm going to read from Matthew 13, the parable of the sower. So I know you all have heard this, and so I think, and I've heard it a lot as well. I've heard it a lot, taught a lot, and I love hearing different people's personalities. So let's just see what we come up with. Maybe you'll hear something that you haven't heard before. Matthew 13, it says, "That same day Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat in it, while all the people stood on the shore." Okay. So, the first thing that I think is interesting, and we just have to address it, where the Bible is written for a different culture, a different, it just is. And so we can't really experience this where someone's standing, got in a boat, sat in it, and the people stood on the shore and he's teaching them. So that's not something we can really comprehend, but it would simply be just someone on a stage, or someone commanding authority and sharing things with others. And so don't need to read into it, but I just want to make sure we understand that. So then in verse 3 it says, "Then he told them many things in parables, saying," so we have to realize what a parable is and why Jesus spoke in parables. And I've talked about this before a little bit, and I think in my past video, but it's very important because Jesus pretty much only spoke in parables. And there's a reason for that. It's because a parable is like a allegory, a story that has deeper meaning, most likely not true, but there's something to it that you can learn. And the reason why Jesus spoke in parables is he usually spoke in parables to like crowds. And so they would hear this story and they might feel good, and they're like, okay, that's something I'm going to strive for, or that's a behavioral change that I'm like, I don't want to be like the rocky soil. I want to be like the good soil. So what can I do to change? He only spoke for those that actually cared enough to actually care about what he was talking about. So he spoke that way. So those who would seek him would desire to know the deeper meaning, if that makes sense. Okay, so let's just read it. Okay, verse 3, it says, "Then he told them many things in parables, saying, A farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop 100, 60, and 30 times what was sown. Whoever has ears, let him hear." So this parable has a meaning that you can read on the surface. You're like, okay, get it. Farmer, seed, soil, birds, rocks. That's the facts of the story. But what is really going on? I think that's the question that we need to really focus on. So what is the only thing that is different amongst these different things? So you've got the farmer. He's the same farmer that scatters the seed on all the different ones. We've realized that the seed is the same. So That hasn't changed. So the farmer's the same. He went out to sow a seed, and the seed is the same seed that the farmer was throwing out. Okay, so we've established that. So what is the only thing that's different? The soil. So that's where we need to focus on. We need to focus on the soil, because obviously there's different types of soil. And I would venture to say that soil is actually the interior posture of us. It's not our behaviors. For so long, I believed that it was our behaviors, the things that we did to feel better or feel right, or amongst our peers to look better, or to those rituals, religious rituals that we felt like we needed to do, whether it's go to church or any number of things. Any number of things. But I believe that the soil here is, the deepest meaning is our posture towards Jesus, our posture towards God. What is our heart posture saying? Like, are we being drawn to God? Like, are we growing in our relationship? Are we leaning on our beliefs and our certainty? And we're stagnant without believing that we're stagnant, because we're holding on to the certainty and the beliefs. The best thing that you can do when you read the Bible is think. The worst thing you can do for a Christian or a church is to think. Because when you think, then you ask questions that you maybe shouldn't be asking, whatever that means. Because when you start asking questions that seem outside the norm, or those are questions you shouldn't be asking, like, Christians don't ask those questions, then you're onto something, because then you're not held by certainty. You're held by curiosity. And that is, I believe, exactly where Jesus wants us. That's why he spoke in parables. That's why there's deeper meaning. That's why the whole Bible isn't just spelled out so clearly that it makes sense. It takes time. It takes processing. It takes thinking. Just most likely what the disciples did. And so we'll finish with this parable, and I'm not going to get into it, but I will say that the disciples came to him. So Jesus spoke to crowds, right? The disciples were there, but the crowds are the one that came to gather around him. And those are the ones he was, essentially, it seems like he was talking to. But truly, he was really talking to the disciples, because he knew those were the ones that were going to get it. Or maybe not even completely get it, but inquire. So it's like the disciples had, and I think this is, when we're speaking about the disciples back then, we're speaking about the disciples now. If we want to be disciples of God, of Jesus, it's the same thing. So whatever applies to them applies to us. So, and I think I just lost my train of thought, but disciples, there's a couple things that they needed. First of all, they needed that hunger. They needed to be hungry. Like, they needed to seek more learning from than what you're just reading. Like, you can read the Bible, or you can read the Bible. And so there's a big difference there. When you understand that, when you read the Bible with intention, with purpose, with curiosity, it opens up new opportunities for deeper revelation, I believe. And the disciples, they were hungry. They desired to learn more. That's why they followed Jesus. They left everything in order to do this. They were also did I say they were humble? Yes, they were humble. They had to humble themselves. And they were also hungry to learn more. And then they sought out Jesus. They always, afterward, he would speak a parable that they didn't understand. They would go to him. So there was like this private seeking, this not wanting to understand. So they weren't like, again, they were always curious. They were always asking Jesus, what did you mean by that? Which is how our heart posture should be, is always asking, what did you mean by that? And so we read this with the intention to realize that the soil is our inner posture, and that can change over time. So when we read this, it says that some fell along the path and the birds came and ate it up. Okay, so what is the path? A path is something that people walked on a lot, right? So then what happens to that soil? That soil becomes very hard and compact. And it's almost like, for me, when I grew up in the Baptist church, I went to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, actually Sunday school too, and a Wednesday night. So I went to church a lot in a Christian school, and it was so inundated with God that it became like, what's the word, rote? It became like something that was just part of your life, but it was part of your life, but it wasn't like, I hadn't like experienced it or digested it into my life. It wasn't part of my heart. It wasn't like I was doing it because I was supposed to, not because I longed for it. Though I did, but I didn't. It was just following a set of rules, and that would bring me close to God. But that's not what brings you close to God. What brings you close to God is you getting close to God and letting your heart open. And so that's what happens with soil. The path is when you hear so much about God that it becomes like you don't take it seriously. Like it's like hearing a word, like, and I hate that, but I find myself guilty of it too. But like the word epic, like that is a word that it's grand. It's a big word, and you should only use that word in very, very rare circumstances. But these words become super popular and overused that they lose their meaning. And so that's what the path is the farmer spreading the seed, the good seed on the path, but you don't hear it. Like Jesus is sharing his truths through these parables, but it just, I've heard it a zillion times. So then the second part is some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched and they had withered because they had no root. So the soil among the rocks, the rocks break up the soil a little bit, right? And so they tend to be like, the soil with the rocks is not necessarily a path that a lot of people walk on, so it won't be as hard, it's compact. So it's like when there's a chance that this takes root. And so it could be someone that when you hear about Jesus, they get excited, and they actually, it's real. Like they experience God, but it doesn't last, because it's just emotional. And so it doesn't have the same stick-to-itiveness that it does when you are when your love for God grows through intense suffering or through hard times. If you hear about you're on like a mountaintop experience or whatever, and you experience God, you are going to go through valleys. And if you're not prepared for that, there's a good chance that it's not going to work. It's not going to work because the soil is too shallow. You know, when things get tough, it's too much. Your heart, it's not like hasn't gone through that learning, like the tried and true learning that most of us have to go through. So that's a posture of our heart is, and it's usually a place that it's like a transition, like from this step you go to this step. Initially you hear about Jesus, and you may have heard about it your whole life, but you may love God, but it's not from your heart. It doesn't drive everything that you do in your life. And so now I feel like I'm getting redundant, but the point is when you go from that and you finally get to a point where you can experience Jesus, that's what happens with the stones and the soil. Like you move to this place where, okay, now it actually makes sense. It may not last, but it doesn't mean that your soil can change, because obviously we see in this parable that the soil can change. So then we move to the thorns, right? It says, and 7 other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. So what are those thorns in the soil? Because we're the soil, it's our inner posture. But what are those thorns? So at this point, those thorns are like in the Matrix, when you have those things plugged into you and he finally realizes that he doesn't want them plugged in anymore. So these are these identities that you've created around yourself to protect yourself, to attach yourself to the world, whether it's material, or you're attached to your kids, or you're attached to your job or your friends, or the need for approval. All of these things are thorns, because the seed, or Jesus is speaking truth into your life, this stuff chokes them out. It does, and a lot of times for a long time, because you may start to eliminate some thorns, but those thorns that are left over, they can really affect you. And sometimes those last thorns are the hardest to pull up, which keeps that seed, keeps that truth from sinking deep into your heart, into your soul, and being born again, like regenerating, like coming to life. You can only do that when you kill those thorns. So then in verse 8, it says, still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop 160, 30 times what was sown. Whoever has ears, let him hear. So this is cool, because this is where we can move to. And so it's never too late. It's never too late. And I look at those who are younger, who it's like you look at it and you see it in their eyes that they grasp it. They may not have all the wisdom, but it doesn't matter. Like when I see that in young people and I see that they, oh my gosh, they get it at an early age, I'm just like so good on them that they got their whole life to understand what it means to open your heart and then just grow from there. Because I've grown so much in just a couple of years once I woke up to the truth of who Jesus really is, and why we're here, that I've grown so much. Imagine doing it at a young age and having your whole life to grow like that. That'd be incredible. And so that's what this means when it says, still other seed fell in good soil, where it produced a crop 160 or 30 times what was sown. So even if you produce a crop that is 30 times what was sown, that is incredible. Like that is like a really, really good season. Now, 60 times is miraculous. 100 times is unheard of. So that just comes down to Jesus is not saying that any of those is wrong. And in his eyes, he is like, that is incredible. But what he's saying is that we're all capable of different types of producing crops from the soil that's in us. Some of us are just wired to produce a ridiculous crop, and other ones are here to produce a good crop, and all of it is the same. all of it is the same. All he cares about is that we do all of the inner work to let Jesus completely fill us with his presence. So we empty ourselves, we deny ourselves, we take up our cross, we work through this, and we become the soil that becomes good soil. Turning bad soil into good soil takes time. It's not something that happens overnight. I think I read something that in a resort town, I hope it was true, but this beach that was being overcrowded or whatever, it had coral there that was dissipating. And so they actually closed the beach for a year, I believe, lost all that revenue so the coral reef could regenerate, I think, if that's the right term. So not the same as soil, but the same as soil. Stuff takes time. But all God cares about is not that we have arrived by any means, because the disciples were pretty simple people. But they had gotten to a point where they were leaning into Jesus. The crowds heard the stories. It made them feel good. A lot of them got healed, incredible, took care of our needs. But the disciples wanted more. They wanted to understand Jesus, and that's who Jesus wanted to spend time with.